Hi everybody, how are you? And a very warm welcome to writing.ie. Let me just see if I can get rid of this. There we go. Welcome to the writing.ie Facebook page and our weekly series with literary agent Simon Trewin. It's great to have you all here. We've had great uptake on the broadcast that we've been doing so far. Hi Amanda, that's great to see you. We've had loads of views. We've also got a fantastic newsletter that has lots of resources in it. Oh, everybody's coming on stream now. Hi, Teresa. Hi, Austin. Lovely to see you. And Rodrigo's there as well from sunny France. It's great to hear. It's really international. This is fantastic. But we've got lots of resources in the newsletter. So if you have missed any of the broadcasts up to date, don't worry. If you sign up for the writing.ie newsletter, you'll see on the Facebook page above you or above us, it should say just sign up. Click there. You'll get both the resources and you'll get the links to the previous broadcasts. So Simon Trewin has been an agent for 25 years. There is nothing he hasn't seen. He has taken books to huge auctions. He has fantastic clients. He's worked for small agencies and he's worked for huge agencies. And I'm just going to bring him in now. Let's see if this works. Hopefully you'll be able to hear him. It's going live.
Wow.
There you go.
Going live. So there I am.
Simon.
Hi. Nice to see you all. Happy Good Friday if you're in somewhere.
Hopefully it's going to work. We're just to warn people that it's been a bit glitchy this morning, hasn't it, already? We've been having a few problems with our tech. So if we disappear or we freeze, we'll work out a way to come back. Just bear with us. I'm just going to minimize me, hopefully.
And maximize me, as it should be. Very good. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Lovely. So yeah, happy Easter, everybody. I forgot to say that. And very warm welcome. Great to see you, Simon. So last week we talked about covering letters and what needs to go into that, and really a good bit about what impresses you as an agent. And this week we're going to be talking about sort of the second half of that, which is the pitch that needs to go into that covering letter, but is also applicable in other areas, and also synopsis. Hi, we've got all sorts of people joining us. South Africa has Irish weather today. Hi, Helene. Thanks so much for coming on board. It's true. We're truly international. So the pitch. Tell everybody why a pitch is useful and why it's important to think about in terms of the book that they have written.
Okay. Well, I think I've said in the last couple of weeks that. And I think if we just focus primarily on fiction for the time being, and I think it might be worth circling back and talking about non-fiction separately in a little bit. But yeah, I mean, if you start on the basis that the world doesn't need another novel, and I know I've said this many times, and there's always a moment when I say this publicly when you think I'm going to get asked to leave very impolitely at this point. But our job is to every step of the process, from the author to the agent to the editor to the bookseller, and the bookseller to the reader, we've got to try and convey what this book is, why it might matter to someone, and why it's worth in a moment where we have so many things trying to attract our attention. Why is it we want to focus our time on this particular book? And clearly, the way of doing that is what we call the pitch. It's the way of taking 100,000 words and reducing them in some way that attracts someone's attention and hooks them in. And I think it's worth starting by demystifying this whole notion of the pitch, because I think it's something, if you've watched too many Hollywood movies, it's the sort of Tom Cruise moment where he comes in and does something and the whole world changes with the music behind. But to be honest, we are all pitched at the entire time. We're used to watching Dragon's Den. That's a really good example, where people come in and we sit at home being really judgmental, and they've got an idea and they are pitching it. Or we go to the cinema. Do you remember the cinema? We used to go to a big place and watch films collectively.
And all sit next to each other.
Yeah, I know. Astonishing idea. I mean, I don't think it'll ever catch on. But anyway, you'd go there and there would be a trailer for a film. And the trailer quite clearly took elements of the film that they felt were going to attract a reader, a viewer, to come back, part with some money. And books are no different. Now, I know we've got some fantastic resources this week, which we've had a lot of fun putting together. And Vanessa, I know you talk about the elevator pitch, and I think it's probably worth our while explaining what that is. I mean, the idea is, you're in some hotel somewhere, you get into the elevator, the lift, and there in the lift, you're a filmmaker, there is Steven Spielberg. and you think it's just the two of us. There are no phones. There's nothing. The door's shut, and you're going to floor 7, and he is as well. And you've got the time it takes you to go from the ground to floor 7, basically to break that awful silence and go, oh, Mr. Spielberg, have I got an idea for you? Boom. He's literally a captive audience at that point. And I think it's a really fun idea. And I know, remember the film Alien? I think many of us have seen that. That when someone was pitching that, they apparently pitched it on 3 words. They just said Jaws in space. Brilliant. I mean,
genius pitch.
Yeah, immediately you know what you're up for there. You know that there's going to be a group of people in an environment where there is going to be some peril. There's going to be something which is going to threaten them. And immediately I'm thinking, do I want to watch Jaws in space? I think, yeah, that sounds pretty good. And I think when we get down to fiction, and I know we've talked a lot in previous episodes about genre fiction, and I think if you're pitching a literary novel, it's a very different thing to how you're pitching something that sits very firmly and squarely in a genre. But just to finish, generally on a pitch, if you look on the back of a book, there is going to be a very short little blurb on the back of some books. On the front of a book, you're going to have a really short thing that we call a strap line, which could be our Jaws in space, or it could be our, well, I've got quite a few examples here which we can look at, and then obviously later on this week we're going to be looking at the synopsis, which is a much longer way of telling the story. But it's about reducing it, isn't it? If you think you have an idea, hopefully you're starting with a pitch. You're kind of pitching the book to yourself. You're saying to yourself, why do I want to spend a year writing this book? What is it I want to examine? Is it what happens if you take particular people, you put them in unusual circumstances, and then you throw a load of stuff at them? What happens? I mean, that, not to reduce 2,000 words of fiction to that, but basically, you need characters, you need conflict, you need some kind of resolution, and you need a narrative arc, don't you? I'd say there's a brilliant book by Christopher Booker called The 7 Plots, which basically takes all these books, the Bible, everything, and reduces it down to 7 kinds of plots. And I think that could be a really interesting sort of 9th week to this, actually, is just looking at those sort of different things and plots.
That'd be useful for all of us, trust me.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, look, I probably read every kind of book I'm ever likely to read. So what I'm reading now is variations on them, which is fascinating. So the pitch is really important to me.
And it's useful. Can I interrupt just to say? It's really useful.
You're going to have to. I'll just talk for an hour. Otherwise,
yeah. It's really useful, not just for the covering letter, but for for that moment in the lift. You can put it on your blog. You can put it on. You're going to use it potentially, obviously, to send it to the agent, and then you as the agent will then use it, because you were talking about that chain between agent, editor, marketing, and that's a really good pitch. Really carries through, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I sometimes smile a little bit when if I've got something right in my submission letter, when I'm pitching the book to a publisher, it makes me laugh sometimes, a year and a half down the chain when I get the finished copy of the book in, I flip it over, and there on the back is effectively my submission letter rewritten as a blurb for the book. And you think, that's great. And I think the agent's role, we've talked about this, but the agent's role is kind of you've got to prefigure how people further down the value chain are going to sell something. So, I mean, in a busy world, the more honed a pitch can be that comes into me, the easier it is to make me, I look among the 200 unsolicited manuscripts I've received and pick one out that I think, oh, I can imagine that. I can imagine as a consumer buying it. Yeah. And if I can convey that baton in this kind of weird literary relay race we're on to an editor, and they think, hang on, I know how to pitch this to marketing and sales and all that. And then they think, to Waterstones, and then it becomes, we've all done our job really well.
I think it's really important. I think that's the key, isn't it? It's about catching your attention. And so for these guys who are submitting to agents, not just to you, to other agents as well, or to publishers, It's that a really good pitch will catch your eye, and that's what it's all about. In the same way that the blurbs, which I can see hopefully fishing for there, on the back of the book will catch your eye as a reader. So that's why it's so vitally important. I think in film, an elevator pitch is normally about 25 words. It's quite short. It's punchy. Jaws in Space is the best ever. I think the one for Martians was something about what was Martian? Was it War in Space?
The Martian. The book's
was it?
called
Yeah,
The Martian,
it was
isn't it?
Yeah, Martian. Was it? I think it was War in Space or something similar. Anyway, or Crime in Space, something like that.
Yeah.
Again, very simple.
Just seeing on the comments, Mandeep has mentioned the Stephen King book on writing, which I know we've actually mentioned in the previous 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I don't know if he talks about the pitch in that, but it's worth looking at. But it's a absolutely brilliant book. So that's kind of essential reading.
It is. It's like your basic level
writer
on the shelf. Absolutely. Every single published writer I know has that book and has read it many times. It's fantastic. It's a good recommendation. So the pitch for a book, it doesn't have to be 25 words. It can be a bit longer, can't it? It can be sort of a paragraph, but it's something that really needs to be honed and worked on to try and get, as you were saying, the sense of what the book's about, the hook, what is it that is going to make you want to read this book? Do you want to read some of those? You've got some great examples there, haven't you? Do you want to give us some of those?
I mean, you saw me leaning forward there. I thought what's interesting, and I spent 5 minutes grabbing, half a dozen books off the shelf, some of which I've been involved in, some of which I haven't, many of which I haven't. But I thought actually the pitch can almost start in the title, because the first one I have, the Robert Harris book, Pompeii, I mean, in a way, it almost doesn't need a pitch, does it? You think, leaving aside the fact it's Robert Harris, because we kind of know after a while an author's brand brings a pitch, doesn't it? A Joanna Trollope or a Agatha Christie, you kind of know what you're going to get. But with this, that's a one-word pitch, isn't it? Pompeii.
It really is.
You think we all know the story, AD 98 and blah 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 and all this. Now on the back, it says it's a really interesting pitch, because it says a sweltering week in late August. Where better to enjoy the last days of summer than on the beautiful Bay of Naples? So immediately that's quite interesting for me, because it's trying to make me feel that it's a contemporary story, which in a way it is, because he's going to be telling that story through the eyes and ears of the people there then. He's not treating it as a historical, it's a novel set obviously in history, but he's not writing it as if he's a historian. He's writing it as if it's living, breathing people. And I think that's a really good opening line, actually, for a pitch on the back. But it says, but even as Rome's richest citizens relax in their villas around Pompeii and Herculaneum, there are ominous warnings that something is going wrong. Blah, blah, blah. And it says, through the eyes of 4 characters, a young engineer, an adolescent girl, a corrupt millionaire, and an elderly scientist, Robert Harris brilliantly recreates a luxurious world on the brink of destruction. So that's great, because it takes us from the one-word pitch. We kind of think we know Pompeii.
Yeah.
But actually, when you flip over to the back, I'm immediately interested in this, the corrupt millionaire, the scientist, and you think these are living, breathing people that we've all got those people in our world. Yeah. And actually, interestingly enough, these are people who suddenly the world around them is threatened. Everything they knew, literally, the foundations are shaking. Now, that's quite an interesting book to be picking up at random in the world we are right now living in, where
definitely
everything we take for granted, it's gone.
Changed. Yeah, it's actually a really good point too. I'm going to sort of slide sideways here for a second.
Yeah, please do.
Talking about title, because that title summarizes really what the book is about, as you say quite rightly. And I think it's really important for people to think about title, and to try, and what you're trying to do with the title is to try and give your reader a clue as to what the book's about. I know when I do the Date with the Agent submissions, we're open for submissions at the moment for Date with an Agent, and Simon, hopefully when everything settles down, we'll be over in October, hopefully. A sliding time to chat to the people that get through. But when I'm reading through those submissions, and I imagine I'm going to have about 500 this time, and so when I'm looking through, and this is the same with you with your submission inbox, a title, when you see a good title, it really, you sort of perk up and your little antennae sort of start wagging. Or certainly they do with me. And I think it's really important for people to think about title, think about what the title tells a reader about their book. So if a reader just sees your book sitting on the shelf, forget about the manuscript, forget about the paper. Just think about, if your book was sitting on a shelf and a customer walks into a bookshop looking for something, what does that title tell them about the book? Does it tell them what sort of genre it's in? Does it, like Pompeii is perfect because it tells us, we all know what Pompeii is about. And then that blurb brings it down to the personal, doesn't it? It takes it away from the very sort of generic, but the whole sort of history side of it, into the personal, into the individuals. And I think that's why that's really, really strong. So just as a word to people, I mean, how do you feel about title in terms of, when things are coming into your submission box? It's another thing, hopefully, that would make you look up.
That was good. It's a good example, actually, of I sometimes think the hardest 3 or 4 words to write of a book are the title.
Yeah.
You know, because ultimately, I mean, I think you wearing your Sam Blake author hat, I think you have really good titles, and your latest Keep Your Eyes on Me, it's great because it's got an internal rhythm to it. It sounds like a song title. There's something about it. It's easy to remember. And I have a particular challenge sometimes if I can't remember an author's book title because it's overly long. You've got to imagine someone sitting at home listening to someone talking about a book on the radio, and maybe they don't catch the author's name. And they start going into the bookshop going, "Oh no, it's got
a blue cover."
Yeah, it's got a blue cover. Yeah, but if they go in and say, "Oh, there's this author, and I can't remember her name, but it's got Handmaid in the title." Oh, Handmaid's Tale. Immediately there's a way in. But I had the great pleasure of working when I was at previous agency with the author Laline Paul. And her debut novel, which was a literary thriller, which we pitched as The Handmaid's Tale meets Watership Down. I know that's sort of, slightly funny, but it worked because the central character was central female character was called Flora. And she lived in a world which was very hierarchical, very challenging, and it was a very, very sensory thriller about Flora, who discovered that there were certain attributes to her personality which put her in peril. Now, I worked on this for quite a long while with Lillian, who's fantastic. Now, what I haven't told you is that the central character is a bee, and the whole book is in a beehive. And I think the book was called something like, it was something to do with August. And anyway, apparently August is the saddest time of the year for bees for some reason. I can't remember what it is now. It's something to do with the availability of pollen. But anyway, and I think the book was called something like Sad August. I mean, like, probably the worst title. I mean, I'm not going to read that ever. But I kept talking to her about I'd ring up and say, how are the bees coming along? Meaning and then when we got to the end, we just thought, well, we, instead of calling it Sad August, why don't we just cut to the chase and call it The Bees?
The Bees.
which we did. And actually, this is, I think, an absolutely fantastic cover as well. I mean, you've got, the whole hive and all of that. But on the back, I mean, by the time, you call it The Bees, on the back we have accept, obey, serve. And it goes straight in. It says, Flora 717 is a survivor born into the lowest class of the totalitarian hive society. She is prepared to sacrifice everything for the queen, surviving internal massacres, religious purges, and terrifying invasions by vicious wasps. And so it goes on. But, so I think actually, and we, what the best day was when we got a quote from Margaret Atwood saying gripping, and I thought, okay, that kind of justifies that, that initial pitch where we said, well, let's just, what is it? It's Handmaid's Tale meets, and I was slightly joking with Laline at that point about what the pitch should be. And I know we talked about the sort of something meets something kind of pitch. But yeah, that worked really well. So, but obviously, look, it's easier for me as an agent going out to a publisher to say, oh, this is, Jurassic Park meets Bridget Jones, as one that we've been joking about this week. But I think it would take a lot of chutzpah as an unsigned author to write to me and go, my book is,
Handmaid's
the
Tale.
Bible meets, Charles Palliser's The Quincunx or something. But I mean, you think, you can always put this in the third person, say, people who've read my book think that, it's something meets something, but
yeah. It gives you, I think it does give you a good impression of what it's about. It gives you a good feel for where the book will fit in the market and how the author sees it as well. So it can be very, very handy.
I mean, I think another way of doing that is to say, I hope my book might appeal to readers of, X and Y, and I think that's a good way. But I think this pitch, and I know we talk about this in the resource pack this week, is that we all pitch constantly, and I think when we were talking about it, we happened upon the fact that if you ever use social media, and I can assume that probably everyone on this call does, we are reducing something to an essence, aren't we?
Yeah.
You go onto Facebook, it says, it asks you for a status update, or it says, what are you doing today, or and that in a way you are pitching your life, aren't you? Yeah. You go on Twitter, I think it used to be 144.
I think 240 now.
240 characters. So you're taking something, and usually on Twitter, because we're all adrenaline junkies, we all want people to like what we say, so we want that endorphin rush. So everyone's trying to sort of create something that has a sort of narrative arc within 240 and says, blah, 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 blah. If it's a joke, they want likes, they want people to laugh. So we are doing this the whole time, and we're all constantly pitching. And I think it's not this alien thing that you suddenly have to you have to go to pitching school, and you have to become sort of, Jerry Maguire. You can actually, we do it the whole time. And it may be that, you meet someone and they go, what have you been up to? So, I've just been to this great restaurant. And then you just talk about it, and you're pitching it, aren't you?
That's your pitch. Yeah, you're pitching. I think you're pitching in day-to-day life. Yeah, and that I found that when we were talking about that earlier, I just was like, oh wow, I had never even thought of it from that perspective. So the thing is, not to get too hung up on it, and to literally just try work on it though, and try and distill the essence. I always I'm now going to forget it because I'm doing it. I hadn't got it written down earlier, but I love the pitch. There's a satirical journalist in the States who wrote a description of a film that we're all very familiar with, which was basically a girl's transported to a surreal land. She kills the first person she meets. She teams up with 3 friends to kill again. And that effectively is a pitch, but it's a pitch for sounding very unlike anything, or the film.
I think I know that one. Yeah, Wizard of Oz.
The Wizard of Oz, exactly. But it's totally different. It just I always use that as an illustration, because it shows you how picking a different set of words can give a completely different impression about the book. So I think that's why it's important to work on it and play with it, and work out what it's about. I just love that one. I just think I always use it in workshops, because it really illustrates how if you choose a different set of words, even just one word in a pitch can change the sense of it entirely.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good moment just to reap in and say, Robert Craven, hi Robert, who's a loyal watcher of this program.
Indeed.
He's asking about, because he's been putting books on Amazon himself, he's asking about tags and metadata, and I think we should come back to that at the end, because in a way that's the ultimate pitch. What are the key words that you want to embed behind the data that gets somebody on Amazon to find a book they wouldn't discover? So I think that's a really good question.
Yeah, and if we don't do it in this one, we'll do it. We'll get some guys from Amazon to give us a hand with that one, and get some info on Amazon, because the algorithms change so often that things move.
Yeah, and just to shout out a few more questions. James has asked about reissuing the same book with a different title, which again is, a really interesting way of looking at this.
Can be tricky. You have to be careful, because you don't want somebody to buy it and then realize they've already read it. So somewhere in that, if it's on Amazon and you're issuing it yourself, you want to make it very clear that this was previously published as. It can be great for marketing, you know, if you've, or maybe you've got the title not quite right the first time, or times have changed or whatever. It can be a great marketing angle, but that's the only thing you have to be aware of, is the fact that somebody might buy it twice and then they'll be cross with you.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually had that where I've had a book published under a different title in America at the same time, and that's absolutely infuriating, I think.
Yeah, I'm on Behind the Bestseller. Actually, just a quick plug for Behind the Bestseller. I do a podcast called Behind the Bestseller, which is available on all podcast platforms. And today we've just released one with Hazel Gaynor, who I actually mentioned last week in this session. And her new book is called When We Were Young and Brave, I think, in the States, and The Bird in the Bamboo Cage in Ireland in the UK. So they're totally different titles, totally different covers. But that's the type of thing where you can get a bit of confusion. Hopefully people won't buy them from different places. They're both gorgeous, but obviously they work for different markets. I suppose that's something to think about if you are thinking about new titles and stuff. Think about the market that you're working in. It's very interesting actually when you see, this is going off another tangent, but it's really interesting to see different covers from different places, because they are so different and the titles change so much between different books in different territories. But obviously those publishers who are publishing understand their market, and that's why it's different. So give us some of your other pictures there, because you've got some good ones.
Excuse me while I bend down. So this is and obviously, I'd say that one thing you should not do as an author is design your own cover and send it into an agent.
Big time.
Well, it's worth mentioning that, isn't it?
Totally, yeah. And don't send it to the agent, exactly, just to reiterate that, or the publisher, because that's something that publishers really know a lot about. So,
okay, well, this is a fantastic author called Jasper Ford. And you can see actually beautiful bit of design, this lovely sort of rubbed edges. It looks like an old book, but that's not my old copy. This is how it was issued. And the blurb says, there is another 1988 where purgatory is a motorway service station, where dodos are very much alive, living in your potting shed and called Alan. And where the future of the universe hangs in the balance of a Premier League croquet match. And then literary detective Thursday Next, that's the name, is on a mission. And it's not just a mission to save the planet. It's a lot more complicated than that. Now,
brilliant.
Now, I mean, quite clearly from that, that's a great pitch, because it's completely absurd and fantastical. But I would have thought that without saying it, they're kind of aiming for, if you liked Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Terry Pratchett, that kind of thing. And actually I see they've got, there's a brilliant quote from Terry on the back saying, "Ingenious, I'll watch Jasper Ford nervously." So that's great. But I mean, that to me is a really, really good pitch, because it's really different. If you puzzle over trying to create a logic out of what's been said in that, it's probably not for you. So I think that's a good thing. I think there needs to be an honesty in a pitch. I don't think you should, if your book is a dark, brooding, literary coming-of-age novel and you pitch it as, Harry Potter's, the successors Harry Potter, you might get someone to pick it up. You're not going to get any word of mouth, and you're going to get people saying this doesn't do what it says on the packet.
On the cover, exactly,
And then just another one, and this is Andrew Miller's book, and I've worked with Andrew for his entire career through. This was book number 7, and I remember when I met up with Andrew to talk about this book when he was writing it. He started to talk about it, and I could see the fire in his eyes, and I could see that there was an excitement about this book, which totally came across on the page when I got it.
He's got sprayed edges. Has he got sprayed edges on the book?
Has got sprayed edges, yes. But the pitch here, it says, in 1785, Jean-Baptiste Barat, a young provincial engineer, is charged by the king with demolishing Paris's oldest cemetery. At first, Barat sees this as a chance to clear the burden of history, but soon begins to suspect that its destruction might be a prelude to his own. Now, again, that's great, because it takes, like actually a lot of these have done, what it's doing is it's setting the scene. It's telling us when it's set. It's telling us the basic premise. We've got this young engineer being sent off to purify this area of Paris, and an area of Paris that It's the Les Halles area where the Pompidou Centre now is. It was an area that was literally being poisoned by the fact that there were all these decaying dead bodies piled, 20 high in this local churchyard. But of course, we know by the fact it's 1785, we know what that character doesn't know. We know that we're quite near the French Revolution. So there's another element by putting the date in at the beginning of that. And as we were talking about this earlier on, if a novel is set in January 2020, anyone reading that is going to know that, 24 days earlier, somebody had died in a fish market in Wuhan of something which people didn't understand, and we know what's going to happen. So I think putting a date in is a really interesting thing. But what it's then doing is, if you like, it's kind of, we started with the Google Earth, and then we've zoomed into this personal thing of one person and the fact that he's seeing this as an opportunity, but he's soon realizing that this destruction might be a prelude to his own. So that's the bit that you read. It doesn't explain too much, but it gives you enough to make you want to come into the room and think, the room being this book, what's going to happen? And I think that's a very clever, well-worn technique, but I think done particularly well here. And I'm sure this blurb was probably written by Carol Welsh or one of her colleagues at Scepter, who I've worked with and Andrew's worked with for his whole career. And she's absolutely brilliant at distilling something in a way that sells it. And then one other one before we kind of build out. This is a book I have to say I haven't read, but it's a book that many, many people have and has been a huge international bestseller.
Massive,
So what they're doing, there's a New York Times book review on the back, which says, painfully beautiful, a once a murder mystery, a coming of age narrative, and a celebration of nature. So that's great. That's something a publisher can do. Obviously, when the paperback comes out, is to take a review and almost use that as the blurb, as the pitch. But we say at the top, for years, rumors of the Marsh Girl have haunted Berkeley Cove, a quiet town on the North Carolina coast. So in late 1969, when handsome Chase Andrews is found dead, the locals immediately suspect Kaya Clark, the so-called Marsh Girl. And then it goes on, and then at the end it says, when two young men from town become intrigued by her wild beauty, Kaya opens herself to a new life until the unthinkable happens. So again, we're starting big, we're going to and then we're going to a dilemma with Jean-Baptiste. We have his dilemma about, is his own destruction going to be as a result of this? With this woman, something unthinkable happens. What's that? We're going to have to read the book, aren't we?
That's the hook, isn't it? Because that's it. We have to read the book. No, that's fantastic. No, really good. And that's an amazing title too. Una's just asking if there's any legal issue with regards to title being similar to another book. And obviously, not obviously, but there's no copyright on title, is there? So you can call the book.
I think that's one of that is absolutely true. There's no copyright in titles.
Well, that doesn't mean you want to use the same one.
No, but I think that's one of those slightly well-worn cliched things about no copyright in a title. But there is something called passing off in the UK. So if I call a book Harry Potter and the Philosopher's whatever, there is no copyright in that title, but I am passing something off. People are buying that book thinking it's by J.K. Rowling and it's her trademarked Harry Potter. So in a way, there is one. I mean, I could call a book. Could I call a book First Among Equals? There's quite a famous Jeffrey Archer book called that. I think I could do, but you got to ask yourself, why are you doing that?
Big time. And also, this book's going to come up first on Amazon, isn't it? As well, so you're going to always be below the one that's of the title you're borrowing.
Yeah, and I think there was a time when somebody else wrote a musical called Phantom of the Opera, and they opened it in off the West End. And I think quite clearly Andrew Lloyd Webber did not invent the title Phantom of the Opera. It predates him somewhat, but quite clearly somebody was trying to get some people who made a mistake and bought tickets for the wrong thing. And I think that's just sort of, if you've written a book and if ultimately the only way you think you can sell it is by confusing people with a title,
It's not a good start, is it?
No, I think
Yeah.
song titles are a really good. They're a really good place to look for. And I don't know what they. I mean, clearly you couldn't write a song called, you know, Every Breath You Take, because everybody's expecting that to be the Police. But there are quite a few books called that.
Yeah.
You know,
One
I
thing
mean, I
you
think
have to
there
be
are
careful,
sort of generic titles. Yeah, you have
just
to
to
be
mention
careful.
lyrics in this is probably, I know we're going off pitch and everything else. We're going to get to synopsis in a minute, guys, I promise. But it's not song lyrics in books. Why shouldn't you use those? Tell everybody about using song lyrics or not.
Well, I mean, it's copyright. I mean, if you say, you know, Sam walked into the kitchen, turned on the radio, and sang along to their favorite Beatles song, fine. If you say Sam walked in, turned on, and, you know, sang "We All Live in a Yellow Submarine," well, you're then going to have to. I mean, I think it'd be crazy if that was your favorite Beatles song, but you know what I mean. You'd have to write to whoever controls the Beatles copyright. You'd have to ask for permission to quote it, which they could refuse.
You'd have to pay them.
You'd have to pay. And I think we once tried to quote from 8 Days a Week, and I think the quote we got back is £1,500 to use one or two lines of a Beatles song for Lennon and McCartney. And I think the author was getting paid £4,000 to write the book. So at that point, I think we just said,
yeah,
you know, let's just be a bit generic about it. Yeah. But I mean, look, copyright has a value, and that's what we're all here about.
Absolutely.
But maybe we should go back to the pitch and the synopsis, because I know we'll get back to that. Halfway through, aren't we? Yeah.
We're in the middle. So so pitch is vital. Pitch, work on it, summarize your book as much as you can, read those blurbs. You know, you've had 3 or 4 there which have been excellent. You know, go to Amazon, read blurbs and with similar books in your genre, so you get a feel for what it is, and really work at it. And as we said right at the start, you will use that pitch not just in your covering letter, but that's where you want to use it, obviously, to attract the attention of an agent. You'll use it when you're talking to your hairdresser, when somebody says, you know, what's your book about? And rather than starting at that sort of, you know, well, it's, you know, about, you know, Tuesday in Windsor, and Karen got up and started eating her cornflakes and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, people's eyes glazing over. It really gives you that opportunity. It gives you that punch to really tell people what the book's about and communicate your message. So you can use it all over the place. You can use it on the back of business cards, you can use it on your blog, you can use it on your website, and obviously use it in that covering letter. So that's really why it's really important.
I mean, I think,
and understand your book. Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say with your most recent book, Keep Your Eyes on Me, I mean, I think you always have really strong ideas, but sometimes what we do is we play a sort of table tennis game back and forward until we get something that we know is going to catch somebody's attention. And I think, again, we ended up going, well, why don't we try and pitch your book in terms of 2 films? So it ended up being, do you want to remind people what it was on the back of the book?
Okay, so it's Strangers on a Train meets Dial M for Murder, which I think gives people, I mean, I had both of those in mind when I was writing it. So it's about two women that meet on a plane, in the same way that Strangers on the Train is 2 people who've never met before. And therefore, when the things, as the plot unfolds, there's no traceability between the 2 of them because they're total strangers. And there's lots of nods to Dial M for Murder. For anybody who's very familiar with the film, you'll spot different bits and pieces sort of in the end. And obviously there's a murder in the book. So yeah, I think that, to me, it summarizes it really well. And that was part of the pitch. So that was the sort of the primary line, wasn't it?
And I think we kind of felt, well, look, everybody's kind of heard of those 2 films, even if they've only seen one of them. So there's a sense of intrigue about how those 2 could coexist and being sucked into it. And I think that whole notion of a modern retelling of is quite a useful thing as well, because if you think Bridget Jones is basically a modern retelling of Pride and Prejudice, isn't it? Now, in fact, a lot of those commercial women's fiction, what we used to call chick lit, which I think is probably a pejorative term now, but we used to, a lot of those, I mean, Jane Austen was kind of one of the first chick lit writers, wasn't she? And those sort of Looking for Mr. Right, and I think, that's a useful way of thinking about a book, isn't it? There was a book called Honeymoon a few years back, and the author's name will come back to me. But it was a modern retelling of Noel Coward's idea of private lives, where you have a divorced couple. They both get married, they go on their honeymoon, and they discover that husband with his new wife and wife with their new husband are on adjoining balconies overlooking the south of France.
That's a genius premises.
And then hilarity ensues.
Yeah.
And blah blah. And that's a great way of doing things. And as we said about this Christopher Booker book, The Seven Plots, you're very unlikely to come up with a new idea for a plot. But what you are going to come up with is a new angle of entry or a new tone, and that's what you've got to embody in our pitch. It's
absolutely.
What is it that's going to make people give up their lives for a while to get drawn into your book?
Excellent. Yeah, I'm just going through the comments here too. To make sure. I think we might be glitching on some people, but I think there's an internet issue, so hopefully they can hear everything.
Robert had a really good idea, just talking about titles, about when you have an idea for a title, just go into Amazon, put in your title, and then you'll see, there are 19 books called When Frogs Go Shopping. Damn, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. And where we came up with the next book, the next Sam Blake book is called The Dark Room, which is the title that you came up with. And when I sent it off to my editor, the first thing she did was put it into Amazon, because we actually hadn't thought of doing that, putting it into Amazon to see if there was any other books with the same title. I think there's one, so we're not. It's not a big issue, but I think that's key. Yeah, check it out. Make sure nobody else has thought of it before. Come up with a twist and try and be different. If you can be the first, you want to be the first in that search bar. If somebody puts your title of your book into it, you don't want them to have to scroll through 15 books to find yours at the end, because the chance of them getting that far is quite slim. You really want to be at the top of the can. So if you can come up with an original title, it makes all the difference. Now, the other thing that goes into your submission package, obviously I think we've got the covering letter pretty much nailed at this stage. So just to recap for everybody, covering letter needs to have ideally a word count in it, an indication of genre. You're going to be thinking about your title for all the reasons we've discussed. It's going to have a really great pitch in it to catch that agent's eye. It's going to have a little bit of information about you and your bio and who you are, because we want to know who you are and what your background is. And then it's going to come complete with whatever the agent's looking for. So we're going back to check those agent guidelines, check the submission guidelines to see whether they want 3 chapters, whether they want a 500-word synopsis, or what it is. So in addition to the chapters, the covering letter is the evil, demon, hideous synopsis. They are horrendous to write. I can vouch for that. Every writer can vouch for that. So Simon, just talk us a little bit about why a synopsis is important to you.
Yeah, I'll just say quickly, Eve's got a really great idea. She said you should make up a new word for your title, and I think that's brilliant. And
that's clever.
Just as a pop quiz, because I can't think immediately, but if anybody can think of some with unique words in, and they can just put them into the comments, I'd absolutely love that. We should have a kind of spot competition here and send out prizes, shouldn't we?
Exactly.
Yeah, the synopsis. Okay, so we have our strap line on the front, and let's think there's that Michael Connolly book called The Poet, about a serial killer, and I love it. It says, the poet, he kills without rhyme or reason. Love it.
Very clever.
Doesn't make any sense if you think about it, but then on the back there's a sort of 5-line thing about the book, and then somewhere exists a synopsis of this book. Now, it's probably not a public facing document, that is it? It's something that it's an internal thing.
Totally, and it's really for your benefit and the editor's benefit when you send on the book, isn't it?
Okay, so I've had, as a result of doing this, and I've had about 250 manuscripts and ideas and emails arriving. So forgive me if I'm taking a little while, but it's a great challenge to have this.
Can I just interrupt? I have to interrupt you just to say very quickly that ideally you want a query letter, don't you, too? So if anybody is, they need to check out exactly what it is that you've got. I can't remember if your guidelines are on your website yet, but if they're not, you're looking for a query letter.
I'd say, in the first instance, move on. You can email me at keepsimonreading@gmail.com.
That's it.
Just say, hello, written a book, this is what it is, and if I like the sound of it, I'll say, please send me some. But right now I'm reading something, and I was sent 5 chapters, I was intrigued, and I'm now reading the whole thing. And actually, the authors also send a synopsis, which is really useful, because actually, in a busy world that we're all in, am I going to have time to read 100,000 words before I actually feed back to the author? I'm probably not. So it's very useful at this stage with this particular manuscript. The writing's really compelling, really interesting. And I'm thinking, well, I need to kind of a bit of a cheat sheet. So I just need to know what's going to happen to get me to the end of the book. Because if I start reading the synopsis now and it kind of says, well, you get the sense kind of nothing happens for the rest of the book.
Yeah.
I'm probably thinking, I'm probably wasting my time a little bit here.
Yeah.
Because I think that what the synopsis gives you an opportunity to do, it's to give you that kind of narrative arc. This is something you probably cover elsewhere with your many brilliant interactions with writing.ie that you do, Vanessa. Yeah. But this 3-act structure, this narrative arc, it's really important. And I think that's what we need to see in the synopsis. We need to see a beginning, a middle, and an end. We need to see, the characters and word that is used a lot in the film world, the beats. What are the beats within the story? And a synopsis is not. A lot of agents talk about a chapter breakdown. That's not something I'm particularly interested in, because a chapter breakdown is literally going to tell you in, chapter 9, Fred puts the kettle on, has a cup of tea, goes out into the garden, blah, blah, blah. Unless that is really, really important to the plot, that's probably not important for me in a synopsis.
Yeah.
But I think the synopsis needs to be more of it's not just a mood piece. The mood piece is our blurb, isn't it? It's our thing. The guy arrives in Paris, tasked by the king to do this thing. That's not a synopsis. The synopsis would be, when he arrives in Paris, he meets these characters, moves into their house, and on the first day goes off to the churchyard and begins to put together his team of people.
Tells you what happens.
I mean, to use a sort of horrible phrase, but it's a deeper dive, isn't it? It's something that takes us further into that world.
Yeah.
But I think that chapter breakdown, it has its use as a writer. And sometimes I've worked with an author and said, you know what, there's something not working with this book. So what I'd like you to do is the extreme version of this is write, 1 to 384, one on each line, and that's each page of the book, what actually happens on that page. And sometimes that's a really good way of exposing the fact that when I'm feeling the pace is lagging, it's because nothing's happening in the book.
Nothing's happening in the middle.
And it's a useful process, that, isn't it?
Yeah, no, very much is. So, no, definitely. And James is coming up with some really great questions here. He said it should, this is interesting, should it not be too windy, or they won't buy the book? Basically, James, I think it's not so much, it shouldn't be windy. It needs to be quite precise. A synopsis needs to be about a page and a half, single space, because these guys are busy.
Yeah.
But if the book is good and the synopsis gives you a good idea of what it's about, it won't stop somebody buying a book. So if you've written a terrible synopsis, it's not going to hold you in very good stead, and you are trying the patience potentially of an agent. But if it's a great book, the book will stand on its own 2 feet. So I think that's an important point.
I mean, what I love about these sessions is I think, God, how are we going to speak for an hour? Then I think, oh my goodness, we've only got 12 minutes left. But Rodrigo has asked about, he's talking about the synopsis should be a step-by-step account, including spoilers, and the writer's voice is not important. I completely agree.
All the reveals, very important.
And then I'm just trying to think. There was one earlier on. The great thing is we're getting so many questions.
I'm laughing because James has said here, James Friel Stevenson, you said there, if we use all this for all agents, they're going to say, oh, you've been listening to Simon Trewin, which I think is hilarious. But I actually work with a whole bunch of agents. I don't just work with Simon. So you can consider this advice well-rounded. We work right across the industry.
And I'd say one way of kind of doing your homework a bit is if you take a book you know really, really well, you could try writing a pitch for that. And then go on Amazon, look at the product description, or see what it says on the back of the book, and to see, your favorite book, and then how has it been pitched, and that's an interesting process. But also, the product description on Amazon is often a synopsis. It often gives you a lot longer. And also, look, a classic book that we all know well. You can go on, Wikipedia will have a synopsis of any one of the great works of literature, and again. See what are the beats that people pick up on.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, that's the most important thing, is that it does contain all the reveals. It gives you an idea about who the characters are in the book. It gives you an idea of what happens, basically, time frame, location, all that type of thing. And Rodrigo's asking about, does it matter if it's dull? Well, it's not going to be massively exciting, to be honest. But if you've got a good premise and a good story, that's going to come through. It's a tool. The synopsis is very much a tool. It's not part of your book, like you say. It's an inward thing. It's a sort of an internal document that is very, very useful for you to know exactly how that book pans out. And for an editor,
I'm just trying to think: is it a recipe, or is it the list of ingredients? And I'm not sure. That's maybe for another conversation. But it's quite interesting to look at.
It's like a combination of both, actually. I think
the sort of metaphor of cooking and writing a book and the ingredients and
it's definitely a synopsis. I think it's absolutely, it's the mixture of the two together. So and they are really hard to write, and people, I must say, if you have the opportunity, and obviously sometimes this is too late for everybody, if you can write the synopsis before you write the book, so even just write an overview of what the story is going to be about before you start, it's much easier to go back and change that and add all the bits that happen, as you're writing, when everything changes as you're going along, than it is to try and write it from scratch. Because there's nothing easy about synopsis. It will take you many, many, many goes. Don't write one version and send it off. Again, it's the same thing as the first draft of the book. Really work on it, because it'll hold you in good stead. And also, the other thing to say is, if people are really struggling with a synopsis and they can't write it, it could be because there's a problem with the plot. Like you say, if you find that the story is really flat when you're reading it, that could be because not enough's happening. So that's something to be aware of as well. And I suppose the synopsis is a very good process, in the same way that writing the pitch and the blurb is a very good process for you as a writer to get to know your book.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're getting into areas of, some people will plan a book in great detail, and will have.
That's me normally.
Yeah, and
then it all goes off piste.
A.A. Dand, who's a Bradford-based crime writer, he writes fantastically atmospheric books set in a particular community, and he showed me his study once when I was at his house, and it was incredible. It was like going inside a writer's mind. We had these amazing charts and color coordinated, and characters and pages and all of that, and themes, But some writers just sort of create a bunch of characters. And think, where are they going to take me today? And I think that's, but I suppose if the more planning you do, the easier it's going to be to write the synopsis at the end.
A bit, it can be. I think it's really interesting, that, because I plan a lot, and then needless to say, it goes off piste. But when I'm describing a story to you, it always makes me laugh, because I need to know the motivation of the characters and the backstory of those characters in really great detail. And when I'm explaining it to you, I inevitably get caught up in all of that. And you've got this great expression, we're in the reads here. And we're getting into the reads, and I need the reads, but you don't necessarily need that.
I know, but I mean, you get into this sort of quite frenzied thing, and you tell me everything about
everybody,
where they went to school and what they were wearing, and I'm thinking, okay, that's great that you know it. I don't need to know it at this stage. I'm more interested in where they're going to do and what they're going to do. And I think that's I think we're just looking for so many analogies here, but I'm thinking the book ultimately is going to be it's the iceberg, isn't it? It's the 10% of the work that you've done that just sticks up above the ground. That's the top of the iceberg, and everything, all the work you've done is everything below, and all of that. And I think the synopsis probably drains away some of this water. Sorry, we're really going for this now, to show you more of that iceberg. The book is kind of and the pitch is just the absolute summit, isn't it? It's the bit at the top that makes you think, I want to climb the tallest mountain in the world.
Yeah,
it's Everest. That's the pitch, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. No, really is. That's really great. I think that's a really good analogy, actually. Jackie says that actually she wrote her manuscript after struggling with the synopsis, because she wrote the synopsis and realized that there were issues in it, which is fantastic to hear, because that rewriting process and making it better is what it's all about. And Derval's asking, what are the most common mistakes with the synopsis? The most common mistake is somebody writing a blurb. I mean, basically not telling us what happens in the book and leaving us with a big cliffhanger, which doesn't help us at all, honestly. Because it is all about what happens so you can see it.
And Mandeep saying that talks about the USP, and the unique selling point needs to be there. And I think that's absolutely key, because I think if you're writing in a crowded genre, you know, if you're writing in crime, you know, the Venn diagram, this notion that even if you're writing in a really crowded genre, your book has got to do something in that Venn diagram that nobody else is doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, even if it's just a tiny 1% of that circle. If you're doing, you know, your central character is somebody who is living and working in an alien culture to them, well, you know what, there's a whole genre of those kind of books. It's got to be, you know, it's got to be something that makes
it different. Yeah, absolutely. That makes it stand out. And actually, Dee has a lovely line here. She says, yes, the magic underneath drives it. So what is the magic in your book that makes it different and stand out within that genre? I think that's great. Maxie's asking if it's worth writing a short story of your plot first. Well, I think that's really what that overview is. The overview of the synopsis will give you, and you will veer away from it, because once you get into the writing, things will happen that you don't expect. People will appear, stuff will change, but that's all good, and that's all part of the creative process. So it just makes it a bit easier, I think. But having said that, if you have, not everybody's done that. I haven't even. I haven't done it in the dark room. So.
And Ronan's asking, should the synopsis focus on story or on character? I'm doing a 250-word synopsis at the moment. It's difficult to cover both in such a short synopsis. That's a good point. I think you can set the character up pretty quickly at the beginning. You know, in the same way. You know, I mean, look, this is the leopard. At the beginning of that, it says, in the spring of 1860, Fabrizio, the charismatic prince of Sardinia, still rules over thousands of acres and hundreds of people. Well, that's kind of dealt with the character, and I bet you anything, the next bit is going to take us into what are the circumstances in which that character, what's going to change. I mean, books, the accelerator of so many books is change. It's something that's coming in, you know, somebody has a world they take for granted and then change.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That's the protagonist, isn't it?
I'm just thinking too about Kat Connolly, when you describe Kat Connolly, who is the heroine of the first 3 police procedurals that I wrote. She's a 24-year-old kickboxing guarded detective. And so that really, you're getting that summary very fast. So in the synopsis, that would have been just the one line, and then we would have gone into actually what happens. So I think that's, and especially when you're distilling down and trying to do something in a specific word count, you want to be very focused. Particularly the synopsis is about the story, it's about the reveals, it's about what happens in your book, and that's really what you have to focus on. Definitely. Really good. Now we're coming to the end. We've only got 2 more minutes.
I was going to say that at this point we normally talk about what we're doing next week, and I realized that we haven't really talked about what we're going to talk about next week. So
we haven't either between ourselves. I think we're going to go with one of the weeks we're going to look at the books that you have really attracted your attention. So
I mean, I think next week might be an interesting one to do. What I might do is take 4 kind of case studies of 4 books that came into me that I worked on. Maybe read you like the first paragraph and just say what was it that attracted me to those books and drew me in, and then give you a potted history about what happened to the books then. And I think that will give you a little bit more texture about because we've talked a lot in theory now about the synopsis, the letter, but what makes a great opening to a book? You know, what really draws a reader in? And I think that I'll tell you what I love about these sessions is it makes me think about what I do. So in a selfish way, I would really benefit from spending an hour refreshing my notes about what gets me excited about fiction and draws me in.
Absolutely. So, and things that have hooked you, and I think that's been really, really, really interesting. And James is just asking, have you ever been tempted to write? You have, haven't you? You write brilliantly. You've written some books.
I mean, I've co-written quite a few non-fiction books. Have I written fiction? I'm not.
It's not going to confess to that.
I'm not prepared to confirm or deny that at this stage. But let's just say I'm interested in all forms of expression.
Excellent. I think Ita's lost us there. Ita's lost us. So but don't worry, everybody can watch this back. It's going to be recorded, and it is all being recorded now, so it'll be on Facebook for people to watch back. And the link will be in the newsletter. So do sign up for the newsletter, writing.ie. There's a sign up box on either to your left or on the top of the page on Facebook. or go to the website to check it out, and you'll get the resources and also the links the previous weeks. And I think it's well worth watching them back to back too, because we're trying to pick up on the different themes and make sure that we got everything covered. And it's brilliant to have your questions. We've had Chloe's come here from Nova Scotia.
Really
we've got
good.
South Africa, we've got Rodrigo in France. You're from all over the world, so it's just brilliant. So it's lovely to see everybody. Thank you very much indeed. Hope everybody has a happy Easter. And Simon, you too, from London.
Yep. Have a happy Easter and stay safe, everybody, and keep washing those hands.
Absolutely. Social distancing. Speak to you all very soon. We'll see you next week,
Okay.
12 o'clock, right here.
Bye.